All right, so we're continuing our journey looking at the Sermon on the Mount together. And I'll tell you, as I continue to kind of go through this every week, just digging deep into the Sermon on the Mount, it's amazing how rich it is. And, you know, as I come here and I kind of share, we're just scratching the surface, honestly. It's incredible how rich this sermon really is. But let's get into, again, I always like to start out by getting into the story, where we are in the story. Kind of getting into the text, okay? Because so imagine being there. You're just north of the Sea of Galilee, okay? You're on that hillside overlooking the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus is beginning to do this sermon. And listen, this morning, we are in the 27th verse of this sermon. And if you're there, your mind has already been blown, okay? Because just think about it. What has Jesus already taught in the first 26 verses? Number one, he says, being blessed is not what you think. So he starts out by saying, you think being blessed is the people that have it all together, the people that have money, the people that have power, the people that have fame. They're the ones that are blessed. And so Jesus starts out by saying, no, you have no idea. Matter of fact, the ones you don't think are blessed are the ones that are truly blessed. Then he starts moving on to, now, I want you to understand you have a mission. These are Jews that think that it's all about going to a synagogue. It's all about listening to a rabbi and just obeying outwardly some things. But just understand, these were Jews who thought it's all about us. We are the chosen ones, right? We are God's people. Those Gentiles, they're not the chosen ones. We are. Thank God He has made us the chosen ones. And all of a sudden Jesus says, no. I created you to be salt and light. And you are to mix with darkness. You are to mix with an unbelieving world. So you have a mission. And that is totally foreign to them. That's not what they understood. They had no idea. And my guess is they're thinking, this guy, I'm not sure if he's just crazy or if he doesn't believe the Bible or what's going on here. And that's when Jesus says, now I want you to understand, I didn't come to change one speck of the Bible. Like, I didn't come to abolish the Bible, everything that you know to be true. I'm telling you, I came to fulfill that. And we talked about that in that journey, that day, when we preached on that and taught that. That's not necessarily simply I came to finish it, because that would be abolishing it. It's no longer valid. But that word to fulfill means I came to show you what it looks like to walk out God's heartbeat, because God's heart has never changed. From the law in Genesis, Exodus, from the Torah, all the way till today, God's heart never changed. And yes, the law was meant to point to Jesus. No doubt about that. But I will tell you this. There is great truth we can learn from the Old Testament. God's heart has never changed. And Jesus said, let me show you what it looks like to walk out God's heartbeat. And so all of a sudden we have all this going on. And I'm just thinking, if I'm in on that hillside, I'm thinking, this is crazy. But then he says something truly unbelievable. He says, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you have no hope, right? The scribes and Pharisees, again, these are the religious elite. He's talking to a bunch of people on the hillside who are common people. They have not been trained formally. They're normal folks, right? And he's saying, unless you normal people who have not been trained thoroughly in the Word, if you have righteousness that doesn't surpass that of the scribes and Pharisees who have been, you're in trouble. And again, their mind is blown. And here's what I'm landing on with that. What we're going to see is the rest of Matthew 5, there are 6 things that Jesus shows us of what it looks like to have righteousness that surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees. So Jesus goes into 6 examples of what it looks like to have righteousness that surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees. But let me just tell you this. What he's saying is, the scribes and Pharisees, it's all about an outward appearance. It's all about doing the right actions. But what Jesus is saying is much deeper than that. Righteousness that surpasses the scribes and Pharisees is righteousness that reaches down to the heart. It's real righteousness. Now, 2 weeks ago, we started looking at the first of the 6 examples. You remember that? So, I know it's a long time ago, 2 weeks, right? And Jesus is talking about the first of 6 examples. What did we talk about was the first example of true righteousness? Remember the topic? Well, let me just do that sermon again. It was anger, right? Murder. Remember that? You've heard it said. Remember that? You've heard it said, but I say to you, and you've heard it said, you shall not commit murder. But I say to you, and he talks about if you harbor anger in your heart, if you call names to a brother, if you do all these things, then it's also a sin. And it gets to the heart issue, right? And that is what we're going to start looking into more of these. So that was the first one. Let's go into the second. So join me in Matthew 5, starting in verse 27. Here's the second of the examples of what it means to have true righteousness. Read with me. Verse 27. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out. Throw it from you, for it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. If your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off. Throw it from you. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Pray with me. Father, there's so much that you're trying to teach us with this Sermon on the Mount. You are flipping the world upside down. And God, it's not just for them then. It's for us today. Help us to understand what true righteousness is. Because I suspect a lot here are like me. And boy, we can go through some outward actions and look righteous, but that's not what you're after, God. You're after our hearts. Teach us, Father. Mold us and shape us in these moments. It's in Jesus' name. So 2 weeks ago, we started out by talking about that expression that we're going to see 6 times. You have heard it said, right? But I say to you. Okay, that expression, let's just kind of refresh your memory a little bit, okay, because this is something that we see again, what we said 2 weeks ago, and this is so important. This is something that I didn't know until a few years ago, and the more I've studied it, the more I think it matters, and that's why I like to bring these things out. The only rabbis that could say this, and I'm telling you this matters, are rabbis with, they call it shmiha, which is authority. Okay? And you may think, why does that even... Yeah, of course Jesus has authority. He's the Son of God. Okay, I get that. But I want to tell you why this matters. Okay? In Jesus' day, you could not expound upon the text. You could not do it. No rabbi could do it unless you had this authority. So you had tons of rabbis that would go and all they would do was teach and talk about things you read in the Mishnah. Okay? Things that today is written down. But at that time, it was not written down yet. It was oral traditions, oral teachings. They could not come up with new teachings. The only ones we know of Jesus' time, and you've heard some of these names as I've talked about it. If you've heard of Shammai and Hillel, okay, that's before Jesus. And let me tell you this. Almost every question that Pharisees asked Jesus, every question, like, why are they coming up with these questions? It's because Hillel said one thing and Shammai said another. And they're asking Jesus, who do you agree with? Do you agree with the lessons of Hillel or Shammai? So it's a contextual thing. When we read Pharisees are asking Jesus questions, these are not just out of the blue. These are Jesus. Who do you identify with? Because you have people that identify with the Shammites and some that are identified with Hillel. And so every question that I know of that they ask is asking him, who do you identify with? Next week, we'll talk about one time that he identifies with one. Anyway, that's next week. The only other one besides them that I know of in Jesus' time, it was just after Jesus, that had authority, His name was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is one of, if you want to go and read, he has some amazing teachings. He's not a Christian, but some of his stuff is actually phenomenal. Okay, some of his teaching is phenomenal. But that's neither here nor there. But I'm telling you this. Do you know what's common in their teaching? The common phrase they use, you've heard it said, because this is what you've been taught. And by the way, said, that word means you've heard it interpreted. But I interpret for you this. Okay? So when Jesus is saying, you've heard it said, he's saying, this is what you've heard interpreted, right? Do not commit adultery. That's been definite. But I say to you, there's more to it. I want to interpret to you the precept, if you remember that word, the precept, God's heartbeat behind the law. And that's what we're going to start looking at, is what exactly did God's heart mean with something? And that's what Jesus is trying to show us. So number one in your handout, you want to fill in the first one. Faithfulness matters. I know you know that, okay? But we're going to talk about some faithfulness at the beginning, okay? Starting in verse 27, okay? Faithfulness matters. Verse 27, read it with me. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. What commandment is that? Anybody know? Y'all have it memorized? Like, which commandment is you shall not commit adultery? It's close. 7. Okay, good. I don't have a good way. Maybe y'all need to teach me how you. I don't really know the best way of doing that. There's some little handy thing y'all can do, I think. But anyway, it is 7th commandment. Okay, so Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5. It is the 7th commandment. Does anybody know what the 10th commandment is? But it's not covet. Now, let's think through this, because that's in there. Now here's what I want you to know. So first off, they believe you need to be faithful. They believe in the 7th commandment. Why? It's an action commandment. You get it. Pharisees are all about action. And so don't commit adultery. Okay, I can do that. I can stay away from that. Perfect. That's something that if you're a good Jew, if you're a good Pharisee, you stay away from some sort of bad action. Okay, that's not some sort of just New Testament teaching. They believe that in the Old Testament. By the way, were there people in the Old Testament that did not obey that law? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I went through this week just to look. I found at least, there's probably more, I found at least 14 specific examples in the Old Testament where someone violated that commandment. And like I said, there's probably more. That's just what I've counted. Now, we all know, though, this is what breaks my heart. Faithfulness is not just a problem then, right? It's a problem today. We know faithfulness is a problem. But sadly, among even church leaders and people that we look, how many of you, and you don't have to raise your hand, but just think about this with me. How many of us hear of someone that we have looked up to in the faith, and then it comes out that they have not been faithful to their spouse? I mean, it is one of those things that it is not, unfortunately, a unique thing to see. And that, I believe the reason for that is we have an enemy that wants to attack marriages and faithfulness with everything he has. And that's what he's done ever since the beginning of time. I mean, early on in Genesis, we see this be an issue. Now, why is that? Why do you think he attacks marriages and faithfulness with such ruthlessness? This week I was kind of going through some things, and I landed on Ephesians 5. Well, I guess Josh and I have been in Ephesians a lot this week. I landed on Ephesians 5, just looking at that text and praying through that text. In Ephesians 5, Paul's talking about marriage, and he says, husbands, you know this, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord, right? So we know that. But then it goes on to give the purpose behind it. Verse 32. Verse 32 says, the mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. And Paul says, okay, there's a reason behind faithfulness to your spouse. And it's not just for your sake. It's not just for, okay, we have this perfect family. That's not it. It's a mystery. but somehow, some way, it's reference to Christ and the church. So my marriage to Julie, according to Ephesians 5, is a big deal, right? It is a big deal, okay? It's not something to take lightly, because it is supposed to be a picture of Jesus' relationship to the church. That is Ephesians 5. So my faithfulness to her is important. And again, yes, we know husbands should be faithful to their spouse. Of course, that's true. But here's the thing. In the spiritual world, God is the husband. The church is the bride, right? We know that. If I'm not faithful to Julie, if I am not who I'm supposed to be with her, I'm giving the picture to an unbelieving world that the husband, spiritually, Jesus, is not going to be faithful to the church. That's a big deal. That is a huge deal. It's much bigger than just a husband falling. Whenever you see that happen, it's my goodness. If I understand who I'm supposed to be in Christ, everything I do should be pointing people to Him. And Paul says your marriage is the best picture they have of Jesus' relationship with the church, the bride of Christ. We don't want to tell the world that God won't be faithful with us. And that's what we're saying if we're not faithful. Now, understand, Jesus is talking to a group of people that truly believe this too, right? They believe that their faithfulness to their spouse matters, and they knew their Bible. What in their Bible, what is the language used for their ancestors and their relationship with God? What did the Bible say over and over that they were because they didn't follow Him? See it in Isaiah, in Jeremiah, in Ezekiel, Hosea. We see over and over, when you were not faithful to me, God says, you were an adulterer. That's the language God used for the ancestors of the one listening, that when they did not follow, not faithful to the Lord, their description was they were an adulterer. They were going after other gods. In the New Testament, turn to James 4. James 4. Or listen to this text if you... James 4, verses 4 and 5. Here's what he says. You adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? If you're friendship with the world, being like the world, is hostility toward God. Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you think that the Scripture speaks to no purpose? He jealously desires the Spirit which He has made to dwell in us. And it goes on to, it's an awesome picture, but what I'm telling you is this. But before we go any further, the idea of faithfulness is essential for a believer in Christ. The idea of faithfulness matters, right? And so faithfulness is important to your spouse. That's a picture of God's faithfulness to us. Faithfulness is important to friends. But faithfulness to God, if you're not faithful to God, He says you're an adulterer. You say you love me, you say you're connected to me, that you're my bride, yet you're going after worldly desires, you are an adulterer. That's the words He used. That's a strong language. Okay, number 2. Next spot on the handout. Unfaithfulness begins with the eyes. Unfaithfulness begins with the eyes. Look at verse 28. So you've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now remember, we've been going through some things about these Pharisees. I've already said it once, but I want you to just keep this in the forefront of your mind. Actions are what drove the Pharisees. It's all about doing the right thing. It's all about external actions, external appearance. That's who the Pharisees were. 2 weeks ago, we said they thought as long as I don't murder, I'm good. As long I can hate that person with everything I have in me. I can call him names. I can do whatever I want to that person. As long as I don't murder him, I have not disobeyed Scripture. And Jesus said, no, no, no. You are not interpreting what God's heart is in this. You are taught, don't murder. That's just an external action. I say to you, you better not hate that person in your heart. You better not call them names. You better understand that they are born in the image of God just like you are. Okay, so that was the heart matters. The heart matters. And if you're angry with someone in your heart, that's also a sin. That's what we talked about 2 weeks ago. Now, in this 10 Commandments, understand, the Pharisees are focused on the 7th commandment. You shall not commit adultery. They love that. Again, it's an action. But they minimize, understand the 10th commandment. Because why? Think about it. The 10th commandment dealt with the heart. Don't covet. Don't covet your neighbor's house. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. That's not, listen, that's something I don't know what you're coveting today, because it's all in your heart. It's in your mind. So the Pharisees are like, we don't need that one. As long as we don't act on it and commit adultery, we're good. It's all about actions within. Now, Jesus clarifies this, and he says, you know what? It's not enough to physically be faithful to your spouse. That's not enough. It's much deeper. Because I say your heart needs to be completely devoted to who God's given you. It's a heart issue. It's a heart issue. So much so, Jesus says, if you look at someone else with a directed intention, if you look at someone else with a directed intention, that's a problem. Yeah, you may not act on it, but that's a problem. See, unfaithfulness begins with the eyes. Unfaithfulness begins with it. Job understood that. In the book of Job, listen to a couple scriptures. Job 24:15, if you want to write it down. Job 24:15, he says this, and the eye of the adulterer waits for twilight. And he's saying, those who are looking around for things that they shouldn't be doing, it starts with their eyes. That's where we get deceived. And then in Job 31:1, Job says this, I have made a covenant with my eyes not to look at a young woman. So here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing, okay? God wants us to be satisfied with the blessings He's given us. Okay, this is the take-home point that I think Jesus is trying to make here. Okay? We love to be people that are geared by our eyes. And so if we see something good, we go after it. And Jesus is saying, you've got to understand, guys, your eyes will deceive you. Your eyes will deceive you. And here's the thing. Don't continuously look around for bigger and better things. That's not what you're created to do. James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift comes from who? God. Every good and perfect gift. Now, I think Jesus could have used a ton of different illustrations to make this point. When he's talking about true righteousness and how your righteousness can surpass that of scribes and Pharisees, he could have used 1,000 different ways to say, you know what? Be careful about your eyes. Be careful about going after your desires. But for some reason, he used this specific example. But what he's trying to say is, true righteousness is not longing for things that God has not given you. It's being content with the blessings He's given you. That's true righteousness. So let me ask you, do you realize, we were talking about that a couple days ago, do you realize the fullness of the blessings that God has given you? Do you really understand how God is, first and foremost through Jesus, that we don't have to pay for our sins? That is the most amazing blessing you can possibly have. But just in general, do you understand where God has placed you and how He has blessed you? I was thinking about, man, God has blessed us with this body. I mean, this right here is a blessing, to be able to come here and worship together. Man, I remember my first time overseas, my first trip ever was to Puerto Rico. And I still remember getting off the airplane and seeing what I saw there it changed me. My goodness, I didn't realize how blessed I was. And that's just through my family and different things. But I just, if we don't understand the blessings that we have, we're always going to be looking around for other things. Let me ask you another question. Are you content with the blessings you have? Are you content with the blessings you have? I think it's so easy for us to look at the blessings God's given somebody else and say, oh, I want that too. I want that too. How often, in a real moment, you have to answer this out loud, in your heart, how often do you praise God and thank Him for your blessings? I think that's where it starts. If we don't have a heart of thankfulness, a heart that praises God for our blessings, we'll forget about it. And when we're tempted, we're like, oh man, that looks really good. And we go after it. Now, one thing that's going to be something that we have to wrestle with until heaven is there are times where one person's going to have some blessing that we don't have, right? I'll give you a couple examples. There are some believers that for some reason God has blessed them financially beyond their wildest dreams. And there are others that struggle to make ends meet. Does that mean God loves the one that is busting at the seams with money more than the one that's struggling to make ends meet? Does He love that person more? Or, let me ask you this. What about someone that is hurting physically, has some sort of physical ailment? And then you have other believers who never, it seems like they're just invincible. They never have any kind of pains, never have. Does that mean God loves the one that doesn't hurt more than the one that has these aches and pains or physical issues? The answer, in my estimation, is no. God loves us all 100%. That's why He paid the price of Jesus for us, right? And so there are some people that will have blessings that you look around and you say, man, that's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. But the secret, what's the Psalms that has, man, I look around at my boundary lines and I praise God for those boundaries, that God has put me in pleasant places. Are you content with where God has placed you? Or are you always looking at blessings others have and say, oh, I wish I had that too. I wish I had that too. Now, God says true righteousness happens when we're content with where He's placed us. So don't let your eyes get you in trouble. Because you're always looking for greener pastures. You're always looking for more blessings. Be content with what He's blessed you with, because He has blessed you tremendously. Now, here's the other thing about that. So I was thinking about this looking with our eyes. What Jesus, I think, is also saying is you have a choice at what you gaze at. You have a choice. Some people say, I can't help what I think about. I can't help what I... No. Jesus is saying you have a choice. You have a choice with what you do with your eyes. You have a choice with what you focus on. I think about Philippians 4 that talks about whatever is pure and lovely and all that. You focus on those things, right? And so my question for you is, where do you have your eyes? What do you focus on? Yeah, physical eyes for sure. Like, what are you looking at stuff you shouldn't be looking at? Okay, yeah. But also spiritually. Because spiritually, we need to be gazing at what is pure and lovely and holy. Because it changes how we act and how we live. All right, so unfaithfulness begins with the eyes. Number 3, sin has consequences. Now let's get to the meat of the sermon, I guess. Now this is some tough language here by Jesus. Here's what He says, verse 29 and 30. If your right eye makes you to stumble, tear it out, throw it far from you, for it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than your whole body to be thrown into hell. If your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off, throw it far from you. For it is better for you to have one of the parts of your body, to lose one of the parts of your body than your whole body to go into hell. First off, what is the punishment in the Old Testament for adultery? Okay, so it's stoning, it's death. And by the way, Leviticus says stone who? Both parties. Okay, so that is the law on adultery. It is a stoning. It's a death consequence. Now, so God has serious consequences for sin. Okay, which so serious that the people he's talking to, listen, he's the one that came to pay for their sins, right? Like, he's the one that's paying the price for their sins. That's how serious God is about the consequences of all this. Now, in Jesus' instruction, he's very, very graphic. Very graphic here. And he says, if you're coveting with your eyes, okay, then tear your right eye out. Cut off your right hand. Okay, that's his thing. And it's funny because I wasn't really sure, but as I look around the room, I still see you all have 2 eyes and two hands. I don't either you never struggle with coveting anything or you don't take God's word seriously. I don't know which one. But it's got to be one of the two, right? Unless there's more to it than that. Okay? So should we take it literally? Well, here's the thing. 20 years ago, there was a seminary student in the United States. He was studying Greek, and he got to this passage in his little room wherever he was staying that evening. He got to this passage. And he took a screwdriver and gouged out his right eye. True story. I have a feeling he immediately thought, what did I do that for? Especially when he probably went to a seminary professor. He said, wow, you really got that one wrong, buddy. But man, so there are people that take these things face value. There's a guy by the name of Origen, 2nd century, who took drastic measures when he got to this passage and another passage in Matthew 19. And he did regret it. He did actually come back and regret it. But I say all that to say this. Think about this. So was it literal? Well, there's no spot where we read where the disciples left that hillside and started cutting off their hands or plucking out their eyes. So either they didn't take Jesus' word seriously, or maybe there's more to it. Okay, so I don't think we have to go start gouging out eyes. I didn't bring any screwdrivers this morning, so you're good. But I think Jesus is trying to show them something more. I don't think it's this literal thing. He's trying to show them. Okay, think about this, though. I have no idea where this is in my notes, but it's in there somewhere. If you gouge out your eye, do you think that seminary student never had any issues ever again with any kind of coveting? Did that solve the problem? No. I mean, number one, he still has another eye. But number two, it's more of an issue with his heart and his mind, right? And I think that's Jesus. Jesus knows that. And so he's using this very vivid image because he's trying to drive home an important point. Now, what's his point? His point is, sin is serious. Sin is something not to mess around with. Jesus is saying, if something is sinning, you better be willing to get rid of one of the most precious things you have to try to avoid that sin. If that means gouging out your eye, cutting off your hand, that's not literal. But he's saying, do you take sin that seriously? Like if there's something that's making you stumble, if there's some stumbling block, and every time you're around that stumbling block, you fall, and you fall, and you fall, but that thing's precious to you. You know what? Jesus is saying, understand, take sin seriously, right? Take sin seriously. Church, let's be real for just a minute. Because Jesus battled the Jews that wanted religion, right? External things. That's the Jews of their day. It's all about doing the right thing. That is their religion. Let's do the right thing. Growing up, that was me. I bet there's other people that can testify to this being them too. Growing up, I was in church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. But it was all about going and having outwardly actions. And it was not about the heart. It wasn't. It was, church to me was all about, okay, these are the things I do because God tells me to do. These are the things that are taboo. I better stay away from this. Or people are going to think I'm fallen in my walk with Christ. So as long as I do the right things, I'm that good Christian. That's my story. I bet I'm not the only one in here. That was Judaism that Jesus is trying to combat right here. That is the external Judaism that Jesus is trying to combat right here. And what he's trying to say is, it's not about the action, it's about the heart. So we read in Mark 7. Mark 7 talks about it's not the outwardly things that defile a person. It's what's in here. It's what's in the heart that defiles a person. And that's Jesus' point this entire time. It's your heart that matters, not your actions. It's like, if he has your heart, the actions will follow. I mean, that's the concept. Now, I'm just asking you. And again, this is not going to be some time where you have to come up and share some sort of confession time. This is not, I'm not going to go to some booth after it's over and have you come by one and you share every secret you have. But what in your heart has not been dealt with? That's my question. So you can hide it. You can hide it from me. You can hide it from your friends. You can hide it from your spouse. What in your heart has not been dealt with? Because you better believe you cannot hide that from God. He knows. You're not surprising him if you tell him, God, I'm struggling with this. He knows your heart. And one of the things that truly is something that I've wrestled with all week is James 5:16. It talks about confessing sins to one another. And here's the thing. Josh and Shane and I, we meet every single week. And our prayer is, God, we want to do exactly what you want from us from this group. It's not trying to pattern it after any other church. It's, God, what do you want from this group? But here's the thing that haunts me. What haunts me is we cannot be a church that just comes here and hears a sermon on Sunday morning and this is it. We're called Grace Fellowship. We have got to have moments where we're together in small groups. We have got to have moments where we can let down walls with one another and truly invest in one another and truly walk and grow together. That doesn't happen right here in a sermon. It doesn't. It happens when we're real with one another. And that's why. And there's not going to be many of you if I say, our invitation is I want you to come up here and share every sin that's in your heart that nobody knows about. I probably won't get a single response. But when we're in small groups together and you trust those people, James says, listen, when you confess it. I love Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He says, when I confess a sin to a brother, I'm confessing it to God. Unless we have moments that we can grow in smaller groups together, there's no way we can walk this sort of thing out. It doesn't happen in settings like this. So I want you to hang in there with us, because we are doing our very best to pray through, God, what does this even look like? But my prayer is that each of you, 100% of you, will want to be a part of something in a smaller setting where you can truly find that fellowship and walk out God's word together. Because I really believe that's God's heartbeat. That's his intention. That's what he wants from us. And if we're going to be Grace Fellowship Church, I think we need to have small groups of fellowship time and time to grow together. So as we kind of start wrapping up, I don't know what's in your heart this morning. I don't know what's going on, what you're struggling with that nobody else knows. Know this, though. I know Josh and Shane very well. I know their hearts. You are welcome to come to me if there's nobody you can confide in. You're welcome to come to Josh, to Shane. If you don't have anybody that you can trust right now and you need someone to walk through something in your heart, listen, this doesn't matter. This is why Jesus came. Don't act the part of a Christian externally. Don't be like a Pharisee and just hide everything from other people in your heart. If you need that, listen, guys, that's what we're here for. We want, above all, though, let me say this. Even if you don't come to us, be like David. Psalm 51, David says, oh God, create in me a clean heart right? David knew that, God, I need you to clean out the ugly spots in my heart. Renew that steadfast spirit in me. That's what happens when he creates in you a clean heart. So the title of the message is Transformed Eyes. Transformed eyes. True righteousness means that we are truly a new creation in Christ, which means our eyes have been transformed. Our eyes have been transformed. Throughout the Bible, one of my favorite things to teach when I go to Israel, we go out into the desert, and I talk about this. When God's people were in Egypt, they became people of the eyes. They loved what they saw in Egypt. Huge pyramids, all kinds. It was a place where, my goodness. And when God took them out of Egypt, they spent 40 years because God was trying to get them to understand it's not about the eyes, it's about your ears. I want you to follow me as your shepherd. Follow me with your ears. And my question to you, I've posed a lot of questions to you this morning. But this one hits me like crazy. Are you a person who follows your eyes? Are you a person that follows your ears because you're listening to God? That's what he wants in a faithful bride. Is people that listen to him and follow him at his instructions. Not people that follow their eyes. So we're going to take a few minutes here and pray. Before we do the group thing, I want to take a few minutes for you individually to spend with Jesus. I want you to have time. Nobody else knows your heart besides God. Okay? And you know deep down, if you've been coveting, if you've been living with your eyes, nobody else really does besides you. You know the fullness of your heart. So I want to take just a few minutes first for you to have a moment of prayer time, just you, yourself, and God. And then we'll kind of break up into some groups at the very end. But let me pray for you first, and then we're going to have a few moments of just individual prayer time. God, I thank you so much for your Son. That yes, I was dead in sin. I had no hope of having eyes focused on you. But God, then you sent Jesus. And you freed me from the bondage of my flesh. And you freed us to be able to focus on you and follow you. Thank you, God, for the freedom in Christ. I just pray for every heart in this room. I don't know what anyone's dealing with, but you do. But I pray for this moment, this morning, that we would completely turn anything in our hearts that's not of you over to you, and that you would free us so that we can follow you with everything we have. So we give you these moments, Jesus.